So we're getting to the first important distinction, being and non-being. It might come as a shock that someone considers non-being as something to think about as something real, okay? But we're going to see why this is important. We have already shown the fourfold division through exitus and reditus. This is actually reditus, not reditusm. Which is the philosophy of the whole of Eriugena. A primary dialectical framework precedes 5 modes of being and non-being. So there's 5 modes of being and non-being before we talk about the fourfold division. It's applied to all natura, that which can be said to be and that which can be said not to be. So it's a perspectival approach. Sometimes being comes out as greater than non-being, and sometimes it is the other way around. So there is a stratification of phenomena in the universe, in creation itself, that is based on the aspects of being and not being. So whatever is in one layer is not in the next, and so on and so forth. Divine reality as non-being in the transcendent sense. So we have 5 modes, contradiction of being, non-being, resolved. Non-being as the transcendent being of God from which God created all things, and the alternative to a metaphysics based on Exodus 3:14, which is the I am that I am. So all things that can be sensed or understood are said to be. But those things that, because of the excellence of their nature, elude both sense and intellect, can be said not to be in the transcendent sense. That is, God, reasons, and essences created by God. What it is unknowable. That it is undeniable. Okay? So the second mode relates to created natures, assumes a vertical hierarchy in reality as is based on the general Neoplatonic principle that the negation of a lower order involves the affirmation of a higher order. The affirmation of a lower order is the negation of a higher order. The affirmation of a higher order is the negation of a lower order, and the negation of a higher order is the affirmation of a lower order. So we exhausted all the combinations here. So all of this, this is all negative theology. So it's based on the Gregory of Nyssa from the Eastern thinkers and Pseudo-Dionysius. Fredegesius later on nothing and darkness, and nihil here refers to something, that is, that from which God created. There's a connection also with later with Eckhart, in which non-being becomes being while remaining non-being. So Eckhart is full of all these seemingly contradictory, though paradoxical statements. Okay, let's go to the next one. Here we go. Okay, where am I? Here. Boom. There you go. And then, yeah. So, an example. Affirmation of man as a rational mortal animal means that an angel is not a rational mortal animal. What man is, angel is not. And what angel is, man is not. So this will be an example of this stratification of being and non-being, or being and not being, as the stratification of all natura in different layers of existence and the qualities that those different existences have. And in their connection, one cannot be without the other. Okay, that's another important thing. Same rule can be applied to all the orders of natura with 2 limits. One is downward. The last order confirms or denies the order above it, since there is nothing below it. And second, upward. One reaches a halt at the highest negation, for its negation confirms the existence of no higher creature. The negation of the first of the 3 orders of angels, for example, there are 3 orders and 3 groups of angels in each order, ends in pure negation, since it cannot affirm a higher order. A second aspect of the second mode assumes a fundamental importance in terms of the unknowability of God. This mode of being and non-being, when regarded from the perspective of negative theology, adds further dimension to the understanding of non-being. So if non-being is something that we cannot understand what it is, but we can understand that it is, we're talking about something that actually is in the superlative terms, but it cannot be mentioned as being, because as soon as we do, when we don't have access to the conceptualization of that transcendence that God actually is. When human being is affirmed, God is understood to be non-being. And when God's being is affirmed, human beings can be understood as non-being. Thus, both senses and of non-being operate on the same level within this particular mode. Every rational or intellectual order can be said to be insofar as it is known by the orders above it and by itself, but can be said not to be as it does not permit itself to be known by the orders below it. This idea of the hierarchy of being and non-being, therefore, does not depend on a strict Neoplatonic progression whereby each order is somehow contained in the order above it, but rather has a more precise focus on the definitions of things. Example: what a human being is, an angel is not. In similar fashion, we can say that what God is, a human being is not, and thereby affirm God's being in the non-being of human beings, which is what we just said before. Only God truly is, while created nature exists through participation in God, which is different. Okay, so next one and last one. Let's do it here as well as not forget. Let's get this video right. So the third mode of being and non-being refers to visible realities in existence and potential realities that still exist in their causes. Created effects in generation can be said to be, while that which is not yet manifest in matter, form, time, and place, that which is still held in the most secret folds of nature, can be said not to be. Example: Adam is a man versus all men manifested. Okay, so this means that there is a human nature that is not manifested in the multiplicity of human beings that we see, but there is a primordial definitional human nature in Adam that precedes all manifestation of all human beings. So humanity as a concept and humanity as a reality in the world. The difference between the first and the third modes is that the first refers to all things once and for all made in their causes, and the third refers to those that are partly hidden in their causes and partly manifest. The seeds of the third mode that are not yet manifest as that which they will become can be said not to be. When they have become a tree or plant, they can be said to be. So this could be explained also in terms, for example, of music. You can have a score, and the score of say a Mozart symphony is very clear what it is, and yet is still not being manifested in the world in sound. And it exists in the world as such only as it is actually sounding, and you are listening to the generation of that music, and you are making sense of it as it happens. And when it finishes, you have possibly a conceptualization of what you just heard. And the beauty of it is expressed in the momentus of the music, but also in its form. And then you have in the background, you have the score, which is the actual music actualized even before it's being played. It's been played only in the mind of Mozart, yeah. But as a manifestation in the world, it still doesn't really exist, but it does exist as potential that is going to be manifested, and only in that way as it has been conceptualized. Yeah. So the moment you start playing the wrong notes from that symphony, that will be a representation of the fall, which you can do, but you shouldn't. Yeah. And this is where morality comes into play. Yeah. So an orchestra can choose to play the Mozart symphony, adding or taking out parts of it, but it wouldn't be the perfection of what Mozart created. Yeah. And this is something that in purely musical terms, not in moral terms, should not be done. But when it comes to creation, this is where morality steps in and says, no, you should play the Mozart symphony, and this is where you're going to get your freedom, by the way, as Mozart wrote it, from within that score. And it is your duty to delucidate from nature what that score is as precisely as you can possibly do. And this doesn't take out your freedom, it actually adds to it. And we're going to get into that in further videos, episodes in this channel. This is one of the reasons why I'm doing this. Yeah. So then in the fourth mode, in true Platonic fashion, asserts that only those things that can be contemplated by the intellectual can be said to be, while those things that are in generation, that come into being and pass away, are said not to be. All things can be said to be since they are known by the divine intellect, actually. Okay, so let's read this again. So the fourth mode is the uncreated uncreating. It asserts that only those things that can be contemplated by the intellect can be said to be, while those things that are in generation, that come into being and pass away, are said not to be. I'm making a mistake in my representation of what this fourth is. It's not the fourth division of nature, is the fourth ways of being and not being, the fourth distinction between being and non-being, which is in true Platonic fashion asserts that only those things that can be contemplated by the intellect can be said to be, while those things that are in generation, that come into being and pass away, are said not to be. So we can affirm that when with the Mozart symphony image or metaphor, we can say that while the music is playing, this is actually not the music. You cannot have the music without the score. What it is actually the score. This is what makes that music capable of being played, because it exists as a score. That's why you can play it in any concert hall in the world if you have the right instruments. Yeah. So in the fifth mode, and at any time as well. So it's persistent throughout all of the manifested creation, precisely because it exists in the score. Yeah. So the fifth mode is that human nature, in the fall, so human nature lost true being. So we can say that through the fall, human nature not to be. And we will see in the return that only through grace we can return to God. So remember, Eriugena is not saying, this is not the Protestant version of it, that the dialectic between faith versus actions. Yeah, this is not that, but we're going to see that in further episodes. So we're going to stay here for now. See you in the next video.